He was just a struggling single dad trying to hold it all together for his little girl. She was a billionaire CEO, too powerful to trust anyone and too lonely to admit it. When their worlds collided over a borrowed car and a forgotten umbrella, neither of them expected what would follow, a story about second chances, about the kind of love that isn't loud but lasts. Stay with me, because this one might just stay with you. How would you like to respond politely? Or, poetically brutal Sloane Everhart's assistant set the envelope on her desk like it was a live grenade wrapped in ivory satin. Sloane looked up from her laptop. The wedding invitation sat there pristine and deliberate, elegant, tasteful, and utterly insulting. She picked it up and skimmed the gold-embossed text. Maxwell Grant and Madeline Hawthorne cordially invite Ms. Eutyce and Sloane Everhart to celebrate their union. She let out a low chuckle, sharp as glass. He actually thinks I'd show up. The assistant shrugged. I think that's the point, to see if you've crumbled yet. No. Sloane set the envelope down, her voice like cold steel. He doesn't want me there. He wants to measure the damage. She rose from her chair and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out over Manhattan's glittering skyline, blurred slightly by a gentle drizzle. Everhart Tower reflected her own image, tall, composed, untouchable. This isn't an invitation, she said. It's a provocation. The assistant waited a beat. So, will you go? Silence stretched. Then Sloane turned her gaze suddenly electric with purpose. Oh, I'll go, she said, but I'm not going alone. 3 days later. Lower lobby, Everhart Holdings. Jack Whitmore pushed a dolly stacked with water crates down a polished corridor, muttering to himself. 15th floor, premium spring water. And don't let the suits ask about the delivery schedule. He rounded the corner and nearly collided with a woman. Sorry, I didn't. He looked up and froze. There she was, Sloane Everhart. He didn't need a name tag or introduction. She had that presence, the kind that parted crowds and quieted rooms, not from fear, but sheer command. She stopped too, watching him, not like she was seeing a delivery guy, like she was assessing something. Jack was tall, lean, rugged, faded shirt, worn jeans, and gloves that had seen more hard days than he cared to count. But his posture was straight, his eyes unflinching. When a small girl peeked out from behind him and tugged at his shirt, "Daddy, they gave us the wrong box again." His face softened instantly like a quiet crack in a concrete wall. Sloane narrowed her eyes. Not at him, at something in herself. Something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. "What's your name?" she asked. Jack blinked. "I'm the guy with the hand truck. Not exactly on your recruitment radar. I didn't ask for your resume." "Jack Whitmore, are you free?" "Saturday night?" His brow furrowed. "No, Saturday night I'm tutoring third-grade math. For her." She smiled faintly. "I need you to come with me to a wedding." "Whose wedding?" "My former fiancé's. He left me. Now he's marrying someone else." Jack tilted his head. "You want me to do what, make a scene? Flash a smug smile, be your tuxedoed rebound." Sloane stepped closer. Her voice didn't rise, it sank. Dangerous and calm. "I want him to regret everything, and I want you to be the reason." Jack let out a low laugh and shook his head. "Lady, you could hire a male model or a B-list actor." "What do you need me for?" She held his gaze. "Because they don't have your eyes." That stopped him. Not because it was flattery, it wasn't. It was precise. For the first time in years, someone didn't look through him. They saw him. How much he asked. 50,000. One night, no touching, no romantic charades. Just be polite, poised, and make him feel insignificant. He went still. 50 grand. With that, he could get his daughter the ear surgery she needed. Cover 3 months' rent. Breathe. He knelt, adjusted the girl's collar gently, then looked up again, and this time there was fire in his eyes. "One condition," he said. Sloane raised an eyebrow. "Go on. I pick my own suit. And I don't pretend to be anyone else." A rare smile curved her lips, the kind that didn't come easy. "Perfect," she said. "I'm not hiring a role. I'm hiring a man no one forgets." Rain tapped gently against the tall windows of the Everhart executive suite as Jack stepped into the room like he was walking into enemy territory. He'd swapped his delivery uniform for a simple gray Henley and clean jeans, but still looked out of place amidst marble floors and art that didn't come with price tags. Sloane stood at the bar pouring herself a glass of still water. She didn't look up when she spoke. "You're early." "I've always been early," Jack said. "The world tends to forget you if you're late and unimportant." She turned, then measured, elegant, composed. "And are you unimportant, Mr. Whitmore?" He met her eyes without blinking. "You tell me. You picked me out of a lineup of ghosts." There was a silence between them, dense and unspoken. Sloane gestured toward the armchair across from her. "Sit." Jack did cautiously. "You have questions," she said. "Ask them." He studied her. "Why me, really?" Sloane set the glass down, her fingers never fidgeting. "Because you don't look like someone who needs to prove anything. And that terrifies people who need constant applause." He leaned forward. "You want to make your ex jealous." "I want him unsettled," she replied. "I want him to look at you and wonder how I replaced him with someone who doesn't crave the spotlight. Someone solid. Someone real." Jack raised a brow. "That's a pretty expensive therapy session you're staging." Sloane's lips curled faintly. "I'm not interested in healing. I'm interested in disrupting." Jack's fingers tapped his thigh slowly. "You ever think maybe he won't care, that you'll walk in with me and he'll just smile and move on?" Her voice dropped an octave. "Maxwell doesn't smile unless he's winning. He left me for a family name, not a person. And now he wants me there to watch the final act like some failed investment." Jack tilted his head. "So you want to be the ghost that haunts him?" "No," she said. "I want to be the storm he never saw coming." Jack leaned back, letting that land. "All right," he said after a pause. "I'll do it. But I want everything in writing," he added. "No surprises, no weird requests. And if your rich friends try to turn me into some circus trick, I walk." Sloane nodded, already reaching for the tablet on her desk. "Done." "And one more thing, Mr. Whitmore Jack." "Jack," she repeated. "If you're going to walk beside me, I need you sharp. You'll have to handle a conversation with CEO's hedge fund wolves and the occasional socialite who thinks waitstaff are furniture." He smiled dryly. "I used to run a room like that, back when people still took my calls." She paused. That was the first sliver of history he'd given her. "You've been in that world." Jack's eyes darkened. "Long enough to know it bites you when you stop pretending." Sloane didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, she handed him a sleek black folder. "Here's the rundown. The wedding is this Saturday 6 p.m. Montclair Estate in Greenwich. I'll send a car. There will be media, cameras. You'll be seen." "I'm not camera shy," Jack said. "You might be when they start Googling your name. I scrubbed my name years ago." Now that caught her attention. "You're not just a delivery guy, are you?" Jack stood folder in hand, unread. "I am now. That's all that matters." The next day, Jack found himself standing in front of the most intimidating glass storefront he'd ever seen. The name read, Lionel and Hart, bespoke menswear. The kind of place that didn't have prices because if you had to ask, you didn't belong. He almost turned around. Then he thought about his daughter's hearing test last month, the way she'd looked at the doctor and asked, "Did I fail?" And he stepped inside. A man with silver hair and perfect posture approached, eyes narrowing at the sight of Jack's boots. "May I help you? I have an appointment. Under Everhart." The man blinked. Then in a practiced motion he smiled. "Of course, sir. This way." Back at Everhart Tower, Sloane stood in the private styling suite, arms crossed as Jack emerged from the fitting room. Her eyes scanned him from head to toe. Black Italian wool suit, crisp shirt, open collar, no tie, understated masculine clean. But it wasn't the suit that made her pause. It was the way he carried it, like a man who'd worn power before and didn't miss it. "You clean up well," she said, voice neutral. Jack smirked. "It's amazing what a billionaire budget can do. Did you choose the open collar? I don't wear nooses." Sloane allowed herself a ghost of a smile. "Good. I don't date men who suffocate themselves to fit in." Jack arched a brow. "Are we dating now?" She stepped closer. "No. But for one night the world might think so. And I need you to walk like you belong there." "I don't have to walk like I belong," he said. "I know I don't. But that doesn't mean I'll flinch." Their eyes locked. A storm and a wildfire. Neither blinked. Then she turned just slightly and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you know what makes people like Maxwell sweat?" Jack's answer came without hesitation. "A man who doesn't need them." Sloane nodded. "Then let's give him a reason to panic." That evening, Jack returned home to find his daughter building a city out of empty cereal boxes. He dropped the folder on the table. She looked up, eyes bright. "Did the lady give you the job?" "Yeah," Jack said softly. "But it's not a job. What is it?" Jack knelt beside her, brushing her hair behind her ear. "It's just one night. I'm going to wear a suit and eat tiny food and pretend to be someone people don't ignore." She frowned. "But I don't ignore you." He smiled. "I know, kiddo. And that's why this is going to be okay." She paused. "Will they like you?" Jack looked at her long and quiet, then said the words that would define everything that came next. "They don't have to. I'm not going there to be liked. I'm going to remind someone what they lost." The mirror didn't lie, but sometimes it hesitated. Jack Whitmore stood stiffly on the circular platform inside the private suite of Lionel and Hart, staring at the man reflected back at him. It wasn't recognition that passed through him, it was hesitation, like he was seeing someone he used to know, a version of himself he had buried years ago beneath broken contracts, sleepless nights, and the sound of his daughter crying through a paper-thin apartment wall. "Sir," the tailor asked, gently adjusting the cuff of the jacket. "Does it feel tight?" Jack flexed his shoulders. "No. Just strange." The suit was midnight blue, tailored to perfection and impossibly smooth against his skin. The kind of suit that didn't just fit your body, it fit your past. He turned slightly, catching his profile in the mirror. The lines on his face hadn't vanished. The weary look in his eyes hadn't softened. But somehow, he looked like a man who had never fallen, a man who had never lost. "Do you still want the collar open?" the stylist asked. Jack nodded. "If I'm going to wear your war paint, I'll keep one scar visible." From behind him, Sloane's voice cut through the stillness like a blade. "You say that like elegance is deception." Jack met her eyes in the mirror. "Isn't it?" She stepped into the suite, arms crossed heels, silent against the floor. Her expression didn't waver. "No, deception is pretending you don't feel anything. Elegance is knowing exactly what you feel, and choosing not to show it." Jack turned slowly, fully facing her. "Then, what am I right now? Elegance or a lie in expensive thread count. You're a man reclaiming something she said. Not power, not pride, just presence." Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Sloane approached her eyes, studying him with a precision that felt clinical and something more. She reached for the lapel of his jacket, smoothed it gently, then tapped once on his chest. "Stand straight. Don't drop your gaze. And if anyone asks who you are, I say I'm the man she couldn't replace." Sloane blinked. Not because the answer was unexpected, but because it was exactly what she would have said. That line, she murmured, will ruin a man like Maxwell. Jack gave a dry smile. "Then maybe I'll keep it in my pocket for dessert." She stepped back, nodding. "You'll pass." He raised an eyebrow. "Pass for what?" "For someone who doesn't belong to the background." There was a pause, a beat where neither of them moved. Then Sloane turned to leave, but Jack's voice stopped her. You talk like a woman who's used to being alone in a room full of people." She glanced over her shoulder. "That's because I am." Later that night, Jack stood in front of the bathroom mirror in his small apartment, now wearing the same suit under yellow bathroom light. His daughter Ellie leaned against the doorframe wide-eyed. "You look like a superhero," she whispered. He smiled. "I don't think superheroes wear loafers." She giggled. "But you look like someone important." Jack crouched down, fixing the hem of her pajama sleeve. "I'm going to a wedding. Remember, will there be cake?" "Probably." "Will they know you?" He paused, then shook his head. "No. But they'll know I don't need to be known." Ellie tilted her head. "That sounds confusing." Jack chuckled gently, brushing her hair behind her ear. "It means I'm not going there to impress anyone. I'm going because someone invited me, and for the first time in a long while I think someone actually saw me." Ellie looked thoughtful. "The lady with the shiny shoes." He grinned. "Yeah, her." She stepped closer, wrapping her little arms around his neck. "Well, I see you every day. And you're already my favorite person." He held her tightly, his voice barely a whisper. "That's the only vote that counts, kiddo." The next morning, Sloane sat in her private office, scanning her emails without really reading them. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, but inside her, something was unsettled. Jack Whitmore. The way he spoke, the way he refused to shrink. He didn't chase approval, didn't bend to social code, and yet when he walked in that suit he looked like he'd been born to it. She replayed their conversation again in her head. "I'm not here to impress anyone. Then let's give him a reason to panic." She hadn't meant to say that aloud, but somehow around him the armor slipped just enough for something real to surface. Her assistant knocked once, then entered. "Final RSVP list is confirmed. Press will be outside. There are rumors Maxwell invited 3 different media outlets." Sloane didn't blink. "Let him. He wants the show. We'll give him a headline he can't swallow." The assistant hesitated. "Ma'am, may I ask something personal?" Sloane looked up. "This man you're bringing, Jack Whitmore. Is he—" "A distraction," Sloane said quickly. "A strategic variable." The assistant nodded. But as she left, Sloane remained still, staring out the window again. Strategic variable. So why did it feel like Jack wasn't part of her plan, but the first thing in years that didn't need one? That night, Sloane and Jack sat across from each other at a small restaurant she had reserved for a quiet pre-event dinner. The wedding was in less than 48 hours. A server poured wine. Jack declined. Sloane didn't press. Instead, she watched him. "You don't drink?" she asked. "Not in suits," he replied. "Old habit." When you're trying to keep everything together, clarity becomes a survival skill. She nodded slowly. "You're not like anyone I've ever worked with." "I'm not working for you," he said gently. "I'm showing up with you." That difference lingered between them like something fragile and sacred. "You'll need to brace yourself," she said. "This isn't just about Maxwell. His fiancée Madeline comes from the Hawthorne family. They'll dissect you with their eyes before you even shake a hand." Jack took a sip of water. "Let them. I've already been dissected, picked apart, laughed at. And you know what?" Sloane leaned in. "What I'm still here." Silence again. This time, deeper. She looked at him. Really looked, and something in her settled. For the first time in years, maybe. She wasn't just building walls. She was standing beside someone who didn't need to break them to understand what was inside. "You don't flinch," she whispered. "I used to," he said, "until flinching got me nowhere." She held his gaze. "You're going to break that wedding wide open, Jack Whitmore." He smiled, not arrogantly, but with a quiet certainty. "I'm not going to break anything," he said. "I'm just going to show up. And sometimes, that's enough to crack the whole foundation." The Montclair estate shimmered beneath a sky laced with silver clouds and dying sunlight. It looked like something out of a magazine. Manicured hedges, glowing chandeliers flickering through arched windows, and valet attendants in tuxedos opening car doors with robotic precision. Sloane's car rolled to a stop just beyond the red carpet. She didn't speak. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, but her eyes, always so carefully shielded, flickered with something Jack hadn't seen before. Not fear, not nerves, something quieter, like someone standing on the edge of a memory that still burned. "You can still call it off," Jack said gently, breaking the silence. She looked at him, her voice steady but low. "And let him win. Without even showing up." Jack offered a small nod. "Just making sure you know whatever happens in there, I don't flinch." Sloane gave a soft laugh, more exhale than sound. "I'm starting to believe you." The door opened. Paparazzi were already in position. "Showtime," she murmured, then stepped out into the lights. Jack followed, and the air changed. Flashbulbs popped. Gasps rippled. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. The woman everyone expected to fade into some quiet post-breakup exile had just arrived, and not alone. Sloane Everhart, radiant in black silk with a neckline that suggested elegance and armor, walked with calm purpose beside a man no one could place but couldn't stop staring at. Jack didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't shrink or preen. He simply existed, and he made it impossible to look away. Inside, the grand hall gleamed with gold accents and the kind of luxury designed not just to impress, but to intimidate. Maxwell Grant stood near the stage, his arm around his bride Madeline Hawthorne blonde, slim, polished to perfection. A smile fixed like porcelain on her lips. But when Sloane entered, his expression cracked. He wasn't expecting that. Not Sloane. Not like this. And certainly not with someone who looked more like a storm than a date. Sloane walked straight toward them. Jack followed, silent as shadow but impossible to ignore. "Maxwell," she said, her voice cool, calm, and clipped. "Madeline." Madeline smiled with rehearsed sweetness. "Sloane." "What a surprise. I wasn't sure you'd come." "I always honor a formal invitation," Sloane replied, "especially when it's dressed like a provocation." Maxwell coughed, lightly recovering. "You look well." "I do," Sloane replied. "Grief agrees with me." There was a beat of stunned silence. Madeline's eyes flicked toward Jack. "And your friend?" Before Jack could speak, Sloane turned to him, offering her hand as if introducing royalty. "This is Jack Whitmore. He's not a hedge fund manager, not a legacy donor, just someone I met on a Tuesday who turned out to be more memorable than half this room combined." Jack nodded politely. "Pleasure." Maxwell extended a stiff hand. Jack shook it with measured calm, no smile, no overcompensation. Just pressure, just presence. "You look familiar," Madeline said, tilting her head slightly. "Have we met?" Jack's response was smooth and unbothered. "You've probably met my shadow. He shows up where people forget who they stepped on." Madeline blinked. Maxwell stared. Sloane smiled. "Enjoy the evening," she said softly. "You've both earned it." Then she turned, not sharply, not dismissively, but like someone who had already forgiven the whole damn room for underestimating her. They walked away, champagne glasses passed into their hands by waiters who suddenly remembered how to bow. Jack leaned toward her. "That line back there." She grinned. "Which one?" "Something about Tuesday." "I told the truth." Jack's eyes glinted. "Careful, Sloane." That almost sounded like affection. She sipped her champagne. "Don't let it go to your head." "It was well delivered. You make an excellent sword." Jack laughed. "And you make a terrifying queen." An hour passed. Sloane floated between conversations with the grace of someone who had memorized the map of power years ago. Jack remained by her side, sometimes silent, sometimes surgical with his words. And people noticed. Not because he talked much, but because he didn't need to. And that, in a room built on posturing, was unnerving. At one point, a board chairman leaned toward Sloane. "He's not like the usual types you bring." She responded without blinking. "Exactly." Near the grand piano, Maxwell watched. Madeline tried to distract him with introductions to no avail. Sloane had expected resentment. What she didn't expect was regret. That moment came when the orchestra began a waltz. Jack turned to her, offering his hand. "Would you like to dance?" Sloane hesitated, not because she was unsure, but because it had been years since anyone had asked her anything without an angle. She nodded. They moved together under the chandeliers, his hand firm on her back, her steps precise but soft. There was no performance, no spectacle, just two people who for a brief moment fit. "You're good at this," she murmured. "Spent a few years dancing in circles. Different kind, but it trained me." She smiled genuinely. "You're not rattled." "I was," he said softly. "But then I realized, none of them matter. Not really." She looked at him. "What does matter?" Then Jack didn't answer right away. Then he said the line that would stay with her long after the music stopped, that you showed up tonight not to be seen, but to finally stop disappearing. The music faded, but the words didn't. They lingered in her chest like a truth she'd been too proud to admit. As they stepped off the dance floor, Maxwell approached alone. "Sloane," he began, clearly rattled. "Can we speak for a moment?" Jack moved to step back, but Sloane touched his arm lightly. "Stay." She turned to Maxwell. "We've already spoken, Max. You just didn't listen." "This isn't about the past," he said quickly. "It's about closure," she cut in. "You don't get to rewrite the ending." He opened his mouth, but her voice was firm, final. "You left. And tonight I walked into your wedding and didn't fall apart. That's all the closure either of us is getting." Maxwell looked at Jack one more time, and for the first time all night he blinked first. As he turned and walked away, Sloane let out a slow breath. Jack leaned in, voice low. Was that as satisfying as it looked? She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just reached for his hand and held it. Not because the room was watching, but because for the first time in years she didn't care if it was. By the time the music died down and the last champagne glass had been cleared, the Montclair estate felt less like a wedding and more like the aftermath of a silent war. Sloane and Jack walked out beneath the velvet sky heels on stone headlights waiting like sentries at the curb. Neither spoke. It wasn't awkward. It was heavier than that. When they reached the car, Sloane turned to him, arms loosely crossed, her voice low. "You held your ground." Jack leaned against the door hands in his pockets. "You expected I wouldn't." "No," she admitted. "I just wasn't sure how much ground you had left." That landed between them like truth often does, quiet and undeniable. Jack tilted his head slightly. "There's always ground. Sometimes it's just under rubble." Sloane opened the car door, paused, and then looked back at him. "Do you want to go home, Jack? Or do you want to know why you were the perfect person for tonight?" He didn't hesitate. "I want to know." 20 minutes later, they stood in the elevator of Everhart Tower, the silence between them now electric, no longer burdened, but buzzing, charged with something neither could name yet. The elevator doors opened to a private penthouse that overlooked all of Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls reflected the city back at them like a mirror of everything they weren't saying. Jack stepped in slowly, eyes moving across the space. "You live like someone who never expects to stay." Sloane arched an eyebrow. "And you look like someone who's always packed a bag in their head." He smiled faintly. "You're not wrong." She walked toward the bar, poured 2 glasses of bourbon, didn't ask. Just offered. He took it, sipped. Then came the quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't rush. The kind that waits for pain to surface on its own terms. Sloane finally spoke, her voice softer than usual, like it had aged overnight. "Do you know what the worst part of being left is?" she asked. "It's not the humiliation. It's the silence. It's the way people whisper like you're fragile china but won't look you in the eye because they're afraid they'll see the crack." Jack didn't interrupt. She went on. "When Maxwell left, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I worked. I bought another building. I closed a merger. and every day I walked into boardrooms full of men who wondered if I'd finally break. Jack's voice was gentle. Did you? She turned toward him. No, but something did shift. Not in me, around me. People changed. Their tone, their posture. It wasn't sympathy. It was calculation. They thought pain had weakened me. Jack studied her. But pain didn't weaken you, did it? No. She looked at him. It made me quiet, and sometimes quiet women scare the loudest men. He set his glass down. You brought me here to thank me, he said. But something tells me you also brought me here because there's more. She moved to the center of the room, pulled a sleek black folder from a drawer, and placed it on the coffee table between them. You said earlier that you scrubbed your name, that you used to be someone else. Jack's shoulders tensed, but he didn't speak. I looked anyway, she said, and I couldn't find you. No LinkedIn, no press, no court records, not even a suspended business license, just a name with no shadow. Jack exhaled long and slow. You did your homework? I had to, she said, because I know what it means to erase yourself, and it doesn't happen without blood. Jack sat down across from her. You want the truth? Yes. He looked down at his hands, calloused and worn, then back up. 5 years ago, I founded a startup. A real one. Nothing flashy, just good infrastructure, smart code, and a clean business model. I had a partner. We built fast. Grew fast. Too fast. What happened? He sold me out. The words came like stones. Behind my back, he took a buyout from a major firm, one that I didn't know had ties to a holding group run by. He stopped. Sloane's voice dropped. By who? Jack met her eyes. Everhart Holdings. Everything stopped. The glass. The skyline. Her breath. He said it gently. You didn't know. I can see that now. Sloane sat down slowly. My name was on the acquisition, yes. You were the silent arm in the deal. My partner signed everything. But your firm processed the buyout. The paperwork was clean. Legal. But it bled me dry. She stared at the city lights like they might blink away the past. I lost everything, he said. The company. My savings. My home. My wife. She left 6 months later. Said she didn't sign up for struggle. Took my daughter with her for a while. I fought like hell to get Ellie back. A pause. And now you're here, she said quietly. In my penthouse. Wearing my money. Jack smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Life has a sense of irony, doesn't it? Sloane stood and walked to the window. I didn't know, Jack. And I'm not saying that to escape guilt. I'm saying it because I want you to know if I had seen your name, your face, your company. I would have questioned that deal. He watched her. You're not responsible, he said, but you're part of it. That's the difference. She turned back to him. So what happens now? Jack rose to his feet. That depends. On what? On whether this was all just theater for your ex, or if you meant what you said when you told him I wasn't someone you could replace. Silence. Then her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. I meant it. Jack walked toward the door slowly, paused with his hand on the handle. When someone takes everything from you, he said, you don't get to decide what justice looks like. You just pray for one good day. He turned to her. Tonight was a good day. And then he left, leaving Sloane standing alone in the glow of everything she'd built and realizing maybe for the first time how much of it had been paid for in someone else's loss. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds like a reluctant truth, beautiful but too bright for the mood it landed on. Jack sat on the fire escape of his apartment, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug. Below the street murmured with the usual chaos of early deliveries, barking dogs, and a bus that always arrived 5 minutes too late. Ellie was still asleep inside, tangled in her tattered pink sheets, clutching her worn, stuffed rabbit. Last night kept echoing in Jack's mind like a song with no chorus. He had stood in the belly of privilege, met ghosts in tuxedos, and watched a woman who had unknowingly played a part in his downfall reach for something that looked dangerously like redemption. And now he was empty again. Not broken, just drifting. His phone buzzed. Sloan Everhart. He stared at the name a moment before answering. "Morning," he said, voice rough with fatigue. "I didn't sleep," she replied. "Didn't ask you to." A pause. "I keep thinking about what you said before you left," she continued. "That you don't get to choose what justice looks like only to hope for a good day." Jack waited, and I realized she said softly, "I've never actually had one. Not a good day. Not the kind that comes from peace. Only the kind that comes from power." He said nothing. Sloane's voice tightened. "Would it make a difference if I tried to fix what happened to you?" Jack let out a quiet laugh. "You don't fix something like that. You outlive it. But maybe I don't want to be the kind of woman who just outlives things anymore." Jack's expression hardened. "Then be the kind who looks it in the eye." Silence. "Jack." She hesitated. "There's something else." And there it was. That shift in tone. That tremor of withheld truth. He closed his eyes. "Say it." I pulled the original acquisition files from the archives, and there's a name on the dotted line I didn't expect. Jack's breath slowed. She said it carefully, like placing glass on marble. "Your ex-partner? He didn't just sell you out, he was paid extra to do it. And the person who authorized the payment was my father." Jack stood. The mug in his hand cracked slightly under his grip. "Your father?" "Yes. Not a board member. Not a legal advisor. Your blood?" I didn't know she whispered. "My father used ghost entities. He had his own war games going, always has. He bought your company not for profit, but to bury something. I don't know what yet." Jack paced the narrow ledge jaw clenched. "So I was never even a target. Just collateral damage." "Yes. And you thought telling me this would help? I thought not telling you would be worse." He stopped pacing. "You think this changes anything?" Sloane's voice cracked just slightly. "It should." "No," Jack said. "It just completes the circle." Then he hung up. Later that afternoon, Jack stood outside a community center where Ellie had her after-school drawing class. The mural on the side wall was faded, but still beautiful, 100 tiny handprints forming a single tree. A woman approached from the parking lot, dressed simply but sharply. It was Sloane. Jack didn't move. "How did you find me?" "I asked the doorman at your building. He likes me better than you do." He turned to her slowly. "I told you everything you needed to know last night." "No," she said, stepping closer. "You told me everything that hurt, not everything that mattered." Jack looked away. Sloane's voice softened. "You once said people don't flinch when they've lost everything. But maybe flinching isn't weakness. Maybe it's proof we still feel." He stayed silent. She tried again. "You showed up for me when I needed someone to steady the room. You held the line when the floor beneath me cracked. I didn't bring you into my world to ruin yours, Jack." "You didn't ruin it," he said flatly. "You just reminded me what it felt like to lose it twice." Sloane's eyes glistened, but not with tears. With restraint. "I can't change the past," she said. "But I can fight the future. I can expose what my father did. Clean house. Make sure no one else gets caught in his shadows." Jack studied her. "Why for me?" "No," she said. "For myself. Because if I don't, then everything I've built is just a throne on top of other people's bones." He let out a slow breath. Then Ellie burst through the doors waving a drawing. "Daddy? Look, I drew a princess on a motorcycle." Jack knelt, took the paper, and smiled. "Fastest royal in the kingdom." Ellie spotted Sloane. "Is that your friend with the shiny shoes?" Sloane smiled. "That's me. Are you going to come to my birthday party?" Jack and Sloane exchanged a look. Ellie grinned unbothered. I want cake with strawberries and no grown-up talking. I'll try, Sloane said gently. But I might be late. Ellie nodded solemnly as if that was fair. Jack stood again. Sloane looked at him. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jack. I'm asking for the chance to stand beside you not as your fixer, but maybe one day as your friend. He watched her for a long moment, then finally spoke. You've got one shot. That's all I need. And for the first time since they met, neither of them looked away. The Everhart boardroom had never known silence this deep. It wasn't the polite kind, it was the kind that fell over a room right before a storm hits. 12 men sat stiffly at the long mahogany table. Most were veterans of mergers, takeovers, corporate chess played with other people's lives. But today, Sloane Everhart wasn't playing chess. She was holding a sword. I have here, she said, tapping a folder with slow precision, a set of confidential acquisitions made under a private shell company known as Cordova Partners. All tied, not coincidentally, to accounts managed off-book by my father, William Everhart. She paused. Several of these acquisitions, including one from 5 years ago that targeted a startup called Beacon Grid, were conducted under false pretenses and knowingly concealed from public record. An older board member cleared his throat. Sloane, surely you understand. I understand that men like you are afraid of what happens when the truth grows teeth, she cut in. The room shifted. She stood slowly. This isn't a threat. This is a reckoning. We cannot move forward as a company built on stolen ground. The general counsel leaned forward. What do you intend to do, disclose? Publicly, I've already contacted federal regulators. These acquisitions are under investigation. The damage has been done, but the healing begins now, or I walk. Another pause. Another silence. Then a slow clap echoed from the corner. William Everhart stepped out from the shadows behind the glass partition. Well, he said, voice rich with condescension, the heiress grows claws. Sloane didn't flinch. You shouldn't be here. I built this company, and I'm saving it from the man who corrupted it. He walked closer, smooth and slow. You think you're noble. You think rewriting history makes you righteous. I'm not rewriting, she said. I'm releasing it. William stopped 2 feet from her. His voice dropped. You don't survive in this world by being good, Sloane. You survive by being useful. She met his eyes unwavering. Then I'd rather be extinct. And with that, she turned to the board. My resignation is on the table. So is my fight for integrity. But you don't get both. Choose. It took less than 10 minutes. The vote was unanimous. William was removed from all advisory and legacy positions. His access revoked. His name stricken from every conference room wall. Sloane didn't smile. She simply exhaled. That night, she didn't return to the penthouse. She didn't return anywhere that glittered. Instead, she found herself in front of a worn, red-brick building on the Lower East Side Jack's place. He opened the door in an old hoodie, Ellie balancing on his hip with a toothbrush in her mouth. She blinked. Hi, Sloane said softly. Bad time, Jack looked her over. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. No makeup, no armor. He stepped aside. Never. Inside, Ellie skipped off to rinse and then called out from the bathroom, I'm going to draw a rocket raccoon who eats broccoli. Jack smiled. She's trying to make vegetables sound cooler. Sloane chuckled faintly. She's persuasive. They sat at the kitchen table. A single bulb overhead cast warm, flickering light. I did it, Sloane said. I took him down. Jack didn't answer right away. Then, how do you feel? Like I broke a window that had been painted shut for years. There's air now, but it's cold. He nodded. That's what truth feels like at first. Cold before it heals. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I needed you to remind me. I could still feel it. Jack stirred his coffee slowly. I used to think healing came from getting things back. But now, I think healing comes when you stop needing what broke you. She stared at him. Why are you so good with words? He shrugged. I ran out of excuses a long time ago. So I started telling the truth. They sat in silence for a while. No performance, no pressure. Just peace. Then Ellie wandered out, sleep still heavy in her eyes. She looked at Sloane. Are you staying for bedtime story? Sloane blinked, surprised. Would that be okay? Ellie nodded solemnly. Only if you do voices. Jack grinned. She's got standards. Sloane laughed softly, not her controlled, practiced chuckle. A real one. And when they curled up on the old couch, Ellie between them, Sloane read a story about a lion who lost his roar and found it again in the most unexpected way. Her voice faltered only once. On the line. Even lions need someone to remind them who they really are. Jack looked at her then, not as the woman who had cost him a company or conquered a boardroom or walked through fire in stilettos, but as someone who had finally come home to herself. Later, as he walked her to the door, she turned to him. I don't know what this is, she said, or where it's going. Neither do I, Jack replied, but I know it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And in that moment, no contracts, no conditions. She leaned in, forehead against his. Not a kiss, just breath shared between two people who'd lost too much to waste anything this true. The knock came just before midnight. Jack had just put Ellie to bed, a soft lullaby still hanging in the air, the kind that made you remember lullabies weren't for children. They were for the parents to calm the storms they couldn't speak of. He stood at the door for a second before opening it. On the other side stood someone he hadn't seen in almost 2 years. A woman. Early 30s, blonde, expensive boots. The kind of tired beauty that once made promises and kept none of them. Hi, Jack, she said. Jack's voice was a whisper of steel. Rachel. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Can I come in? He didn't move. What do you want? Her eyes flicked around the hallway. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. Jack hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked in, immediately drawn to the pictures on the side shelf. One was Ellie in a cardboard crown. Another was her with Jack, mid-laugh icing on both their noses. Rachel's face tightened. She looks happy. She is. She turned. I've been in rehab. Twice. I know, Jack said quietly. I thought about Ellie every single day. Jack nodded once. Thinking's not the same as showing up. I know that too. She stepped closer. I want to see her. Jack didn't flinch. You walked out when she couldn't even tie her shoes. I was sick. You were selfish, he said calmly. And sick. The two aren't exclusive. Her voice cracked. She's my daughter. She's my daughter now. You forfeited that title when you left and signed over custody without blinking. I wasn't in my right mind, Jack cut in, not with anger, but truth. And now you are. That's good, but don't confuse recovery with redemption. They're not the same road. Silence fell. Rachel backed toward the door, then paused. There's someone in your life now. Jack's jaw tensed. I saw her name in the paper, she added. Sloane Everhart, CEO turned saint. The internet loves a makeover. Jack narrowed his eyes. If you're here to start trouble, I'm not. She softened. I wanted to see you. And to say I'm sorry, even if you'll never believe it. Jack leaned against the table, hands clasped tightly. I believe in apologies, he said, but only when they come with changed behavior, not just changed words. Rachel nodded, slowly, then reached into her coat and handed him a folded envelope. My number. In case she ever wants to ask questions, I'm brave enough to answer. He took it wordlessly. As she stepped out, she turned one last time. She looks like me. Jack looked her straight in the eye. No, she looks like hope, and hope looks like whoever fights for it. The next morning, Sloane was already seated at the corner booth of an old diner Jack used to frequent with Ellie on weekends. She wore a cream sweater, no makeup, hair loosely pulled back. She looked less like a CEO and more like someone trying to remember what warmth felt like. Jack slid into the seat opposite her. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. He stirred his coffee slowly. "Rachel came by last night." Sloane's eyes sharpened, but her voice stayed even. "The ex. She wants to see Ellie." Sloane didn't respond right away. Then, "What did you say, that she doesn't get to walk in and rewrite the ending just because she regrets the middle?" Sloane nodded slowly. "That's a good line." It wasn't a line. It was truth. They sat in silence as the waitress brought pancakes for Ellie, who was in a booth nearby drawing a rocket that somehow had flowers for exhaust. Sloane glanced over at her, then back at Jack. "She'll ask someday," she said. "About her mother." "I know. What will you tell her?" "The truth," he replied, but gently. "I'll tell her that some people love with all they have, and sometimes all they have just isn't enough." Sloane swallowed. "Do you think that's true of me too?" Jack's eyes met hers. Steady. Kind. "No. You've never loved halfway. You just didn't know where to aim it." She blinked quickly, then smiled barely. "And now," Jack said, "you're learning. And so am I." He reached into his coat pocket and slid her a small hand-drawn card. She opened it. It was Ellie's handwriting. Crooked, colorful letters. "Thank you for making Daddy laugh again." Sloane's eyes shimmered. "She made it herself," Jack said. "Didn't even tell me." Sloane ran her thumb gently across the paper as if touching something sacred. "I don't know if I deserve that." Jack tilted his head. "Maybe not yet. But she thinks you do, and that's a good place to start." She folded the card carefully like it was more fragile than any contract she'd ever signed. Then looked at him. "You said something once that healing isn't about getting back what you lost, but letting go of what broke you. I still believe that. Then maybe we can both let go of what didn't serve us, of the people we had to be to survive." Jack smiled, not wide, but deep. "Maybe we already are." At that moment, Ellie came bouncing over holding up her drawing. "I added a parachute in case the rocket gets scared." Jack chuckled. "Smart thinking." Sloane leaned down. "Even the strongest rockets need a soft way back to Earth." Ellie beamed. "Do you want to color the next one with me?" Sloane blinked. "I'd love to." As they sat there, Jack watching the two people who had cracked open parts of him, he thought long buried something settled in his chest. Not peace. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The city breathed in soft blues and golds that evening, the hour between exhaustion and stillness, when even the noise quieted enough for people to hear their hearts. Jack stood at the foot of the rooftop stairs, staring up at the soft glow above. Sloane had sent a message earlier. "Come up, dress warm." He climbed the narrow steps, the door creaking open onto the old rooftop of her apartment building. There she was, sitting cross-legged on a weathered blanket, two thermoses beside her, and a galaxy of string lights overhead. "You built a sky," he said, stepping out into the soft light. Sloane looked up and smiled. "No stars in Manhattan. I figured I'd make some." Jack chuckled as he joined her on the blanket. The skyline loomed behind her silver towers, reaching into the dusk like frozen waves. "You didn't have to impress me, you know," he said, unscrewing a thermos lid. She handed him a cup. "It's not for you. It's for me. I've spent my whole life building things that sparkle. Tonight, I wanted to build something that means something." He took a sip. "Chamomile and honey." "You're changing," Jack said. "No," she replied softly. "I'm just remembering." They sat for a moment watching the city blink below. "I used to come up here when I was a teenager," Sloane said. "After fights with my father. After every boardroom failure. This was the only place where I could take off the mask." "Why are you showing me this?" Jack asked. "Because you're the first person I've ever wanted to see me without it." Jack looked at her, truly looked past the poise and perfection, and he saw her afraid and brave in the same breath. "You think I'm strong," she said, "but most of the time I'm just performing strength." Jack didn't blink. Real strength is being seen in your softness and not flinching. Sloane exhaled shakily. Then I want to be strong. He reached over and gently touched her hand. Then, start here. Silence fell again. But this time it wasn't empty. It was sacred. Sloane turned to him, voice low. Do you think it's possible? For people like us broken in such different ways to find something whole? Jack stared down at their hands. I don't think love is what saves us from the wreckage, he said. I think it's what we find when we stop pretending we were never broken. She let his words settle deep. I spent years believing I had to earn love by being useful, powerful, needed, she admitted. But with you, I just want to be. Jack's voice was soft, and that's exactly enough. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in. It wasn't a grand, cinematic kiss. It was quieter. A meeting of breath and memory and longing that had waited too long. When they parted, Sloane's forehead rested against his. I'm terrified, she whispered. So am I, he answered. But let's not run from it this time. Later that week, the three of them, Jack, Sloane, and Ellie, found themselves at a quiet farmer's market on the edge of the city. It wasn't planned. Sloane had picked them up in a borrowed car. No security, no chauffeur, just her hair in a ponytail, sunglasses, pushed up laughing when Ellie insisted they buy every jar of strawberry jam they passed. You know, this stuff is basically just candy in disguise, right? Jack said, examining a mason jar. Good, Ellie chirped. Then I won't need dessert. Sloane bent down, whispering loudly, Don't tell your dad, but I agree. Jack raised a brow. Oh, it's like that now, Team Strawberry Sloane said, sticking her tongue out. Ellie giggled uncontrollably. And Jack? He just watched them. Two pieces of his life he never imagined would fit in the same frame. Yet here they were, painting Saturdays in color again. As they sat on a bench with their bags and jam, Ellie played with a ladybug on her hand. Sloane leaned into Jack. You know what scares me the most? She asked. What? That I might actually deserve this. Jack looked at her. You do. She nodded, tears barely held. It's hard to let something this gentle in after a lifetime of hardness. It's not gentleness that's scary, Jack said. It's the silence it brings, because that's when you hear everything you tried to outrun. Sloane blinked quietly, undone. Then Ellie climbed onto both their laps, sticky fingers and wild hair. Are we a team now? She asked. Jack froze, unsure how to answer, but Sloane without hesitation pulled Ellie close and said, If you'll have me. Ellie nodded, satisfied. Then yes. That night, after Ellie had gone to sleep, Jack stood at the doorway of her room. The nightlight glowed softly. He lingered longer than usual. Sloane came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Is this what healing looks like? She asked. Jack turned, resting his forehead against hers. No, he said quietly. This is what hope looks like when it finally believes it has a home. The voicemail blinked on Jack's phone just after midnight. He was finishing up a short story, one he hadn't meant to write, but which poured out of him like water breaking through a dam. It was about a man who learned how to breathe again after forgetting what softness felt like. The ending wasn't done yet, but the call cut through it. Unknown number, New Jersey area code. Rachel. Jack stared at the screen, then pressed play. Hey, I know you said not to call, but I couldn't stop thinking about what you said about needing to earn redemption, and I think I can do that. I met with a family lawyer today. I'm filing a petition for joint custody. The air left the room. I'm not trying to take her away, Jack. I just want her to know I didn't give up forever, and if it matters, I'm clean. I'm staying clean. You're a good father, but I'm still her mother. That has to count for something. Click. He stood there in silence, then slowly turned to Ellie's door. The nightlight inside was still glowing soft yellow. He didn't go in. He just stood outside, one hand pressed against the wood. The next morning he met Sloane at her office, but something was already off. She greeted him with a guarded smile. Her assistant hovered nearby with a concerned glance. "What's wrong?" Jack asked quietly. Sloane hesitated, then handed him a tablet. The headline was brutal. From janitor to jackpot, single dad, seen with CEO after daughter's real mother files custody claim. His throat dried. The photos were grainy but real, one from the farmer's market, another outside Ellie's school. "Someone's digging," Sloane said. "They're framing it like you're manipulating me to gain leverage in a custody battle." "I didn't leak anything, I know," she interrupted. "But optics matter. My board's already nervous after the internal audit fallout. Now they think you're a liability." Jack's shoulders stiffened. "So, what do you want me to disappear until this blows over?" "No," Sloane said, but she didn't say it with certainty. I need to protect what I've rebuilt." Jack looked at her. Really looked. "And what about what we were building?" She was quiet. Jack's jaw clenched. "You told me you wanted something real, but when it got messy you went back to being safe." Her voice cracked. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's honest." Sloane stepped closer, her voice low. "I'm trying to hold everything together. My name, my company, my sanity. I just need time to think." He nodded once, cold, measured. "Time's all we ever had," he said, "until we didn't." And then he walked out. That evening, Sloane sat alone in her penthouse. The lights of the city glittered below, mocking her like 1,000 blinking reminders of every lie she once had to believe in order to survive. She thought of Jack's eyes when he closed that door. Not angry, just tired. She picked up the card Ellie had made. "Thank you for making Daddy laugh again." Her fingers trembled, because she hadn't just pushed Jack away. She'd made a child believe she could be trusted and then walked away the second things got uncomfortable. "Is this who I still am?" She heard her father's voice in her memory. "Control the narrative before the narrative controls you." But Jack never wanted to control anything. He just wanted to be loved without performance. And she hadn't known how. Not until she lost the one person who looked at her and saw home instead of headlines. Meanwhile, Jack sat on the fire escape outside his apartment, staring at the quiet alley below. Rachel hadn't followed up. The story was snowballing. A lawyer had left a voicemail about court scheduling. But none of that cut as deep as the silence from Sloane. He could forgive attack. He could weather insult. But being doubted, being treated like a calculation, that hurt. Ellie came out in her pajamas, climbing into his lap without a word. After a long pause, she said, "Is the nice lady not coming back?" Jack swallowed. She might need some time. Ellie nodded. "That's okay. Sometimes I need time, too, like when I cried in the cafeteria and didn't want anyone to look at me." Jack kissed her hair. "I know." Ellie tilted her head up. "But you waited anyway. Remember, you just sat there till I was ready." He smiled faintly. Maybe that's what love was. Not fixing, not chasing, just waiting, gently, with presence. The next afternoon, Jack found a letter at his door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of expensive paper, handwritten, Sloane's script tight, elegant, but clearly shaken. "Jack, I said I needed time. What I should have said is I needed courage, and I didn't have enough of it when it mattered most. You were never the liability. My fear was, you didn't cost me my legacy. You reminded me I'm more than one." Ellie gave me a drawing. It had a rocket and a parachute. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. She was teaching me something you already knew. Sometimes the only way to fly is to trust where you'll land. If you can forgive me, not quickly but truly, I'd like to try again. Not as your solution, not as your project, just as the woman who's learning how to stay when it's hard. I miss the way you breathe when you're not pretending to be fine. I miss the way Ellie says, "Strawberry jam like a queen." Mostly, I miss the sound of our quiet. Sloane Jack stood still, reading it twice, then folded it carefully, placed it in his pocket, and looked up at the sky, already darker, but not without stars. The court date came and went quietly. Rachel never showed. Her lawyer explained it was voluntary, that she had withdrawn the petition after serious reconsideration. Jack didn't ask for more. He didn't need it. Sometimes closure came not as a bang, but as a decision to stop bleeding into old wounds. He walked out of the courthouse holding Ellie's hand. The day was bright breezy. She skipped beside him, unaware of the battle that had been dodged, and perhaps that was the truest victory of all. They stopped for ice cream strawberry, of course. Extra messy, Ellie said, eyes sparkling. Just how you don't like it. Jack laughed. That's how I know it's yours. She giggled as she smeared a dot of pink on his nose, and for a long, sweet moment it felt like the world was enough. That night a knock came at the door. Jack opened it slowly. There she was in jeans, a simple coat holding nothing but a folded piece of paper. Sloane. Her hair was slightly windblown. Her eyes were tired, and still she looked more beautiful than she ever had in heels and power suits. She didn't speak at first. Neither did he. Then she said, I forgot how to knock until you reminded me that doors only stay closed when we're too afraid to ask for another chance. Jack stepped aside. She walked in. Ellie looked up from the couch, blinked twice, then grinned. You came back. Sloane knelt beside her. Only if it's okay with you. Ellie nodded with unfiltered joy. You missed the rocket launch. I'll never miss another one, Sloane whispered. That's a promise. Ellie threw her arms around her, and Jack watched silently, reverently, as the broken places in 3 separate hearts began stitching themselves together, thread by thread, choice by choice. Later, after Ellie had fallen asleep with Sloane's hand still in hers, Jack led her to the kitchen. They sat in silence, the kind that no longer felt like avoidance, but intimacy. Jack poured tea. You didn't have to come back. I know. He met her eyes. So why did you? She exhaled long and real, because running never healed me. But the silence between us, it hurt more than anything I've ever walked away from. And I realized, I don't want to be the woman who builds empires and loses every room worth living in. Jack looked at her unflinching. And what do you want to be? She leaned forward. The woman who stays. The one who learns how to color outside the lines with a 6-year-old and gets strawberry jam on her silk blouse. The one who laughs at midnight and cries in the morning and is never afraid to say, I was wrong. He smiled, soft, tired, whole. I was wrong, too. She blinked. I thought love had to be earned with suffering, that I needed to prove I wasn't broken. But maybe love is what happens when 2 people agree to carry each other's pieces and never pretend they aren't sharp. Sloane reached for his hand. I'm not perfect, Good Jack said, because perfect never taught anyone how to stay. They sat there until the tea grew cold, but the moment only grew warmer. Weeks passed, and love-like soil turned in spring began to bloom again. Jack started writing again, not just short pieces for himself, but chapters of something bigger. A novel, maybe. One about second chances. One that didn't start with perfection, but with mess, and grew into grace. Sloane stepped back from her board chair. Not in retreat, in renewal. She launched a foundation under her mother's name, one that helped working-class parents find childcare while they rebuilt their lives. And on Sunday mornings, the 3 of them, Jack, Ellie, and Sloane, made pancakes. Burnt ones, with too much syrup, and laughter that didn't need to be explained. One morning, Ellie stood in the hallway with a crumpled piece of paper in hand. I made this, she said shyly. Jack and Sloane unfolded it together. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands. Above them, a sun. Below them, grass, messy, joyful, real. And across the top, in crooked pink crayon, our home. Jack looked at Sloane. Sloane looked at Ellie. And none of them said a word. Because sometimes the heart says what words never could. Not all love stories start with fireworks. Some begin with small kindnesses. shared silence, one cup of tea, one cracked voice. But if they're true, they don't end at the first storm. They bend, they breathe, they begin again. And that's how a simple arrangement turned into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. A new beginning, built on trust, compassion, and a love they never saw coming. Now it's your turn. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Did this story move you? Did a moment speak to your heart? Share your feelings, your favorite line, or even just a hello from your corner of the world. We post stories like this every single day, so if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment that could brighten your day. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness change everything.